If you made it to the end, thank you. Thank you for being honest enough to stay with this story. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it mirrored your own pain. Maybe it felt too real, too close. But maybe that's exactly what you needed. Because the truth is, you're not alone. You've never been. God was in the silence. He was in the doubt. He was in the moment you thought you'd gone too far. And He is here, now. Not because you earned Him, not because you're flawless, but because love stays, and He is love. So take a deep breath. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to hide. You're seen, you're still wanted, and you have a hand to hold as you walk forward with the God who never left. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part I never expected. I thought that when someone lost their faith, or even just lost the sense of closeness to God, it would come in a dramatic moment, a tragedy, a betrayal, a scream into the heavens with no answer. But for me, it was subtle, quiet, like a slow fading light at the end of the day. You don't notice when the sun disappears, only that darkness is suddenly around you. That's what it felt like when I stopped feeling God. I was still doing all the things, still going to church, still opening my Bible, still nodding when others talked about how good God was, still singing along to songs that once stirred something deep in me. I knew the words by heart. I knew the rhythm of worship, but my heart had drifted into silence. I didn't know how to explain it to anyone. I didn't even know how to explain it to myself, because I hadn't stopped believing in God. I hadn't rejected Him. I hadn't turned my back in rebellion or anger. I just didn't feel Him anymore. And for a long time, that scared me more than anything else. I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong. Maybe I missed some secret formula. Maybe I hadn't prayed enough, or prayed correctly. Maybe I wasn't repentant enough, passionate enough, humble enough. The more I tried to fix it, the more it felt like I was spiraling. I'd sit in the quiet and ask, "Where are you?" and hear nothing but my own breath in the room. I thought I was broken, or worse, I thought God had moved on, that He'd grown tired of my inconsistency, my doubt, my weak faith, that He was spending time with people who got it right, people who were bold in prayer, who didn't wrestle with the silence, people who knew how to find Him even when they felt lost. But not me. I tried harder. I said all the right things. I made myself more disciplined. I tried to force the feeling back, like maybe if I proved myself spiritual enough, God would show up again. But I was chasing an experience, not intimacy. I was desperate for emotion, not presence. And the more I chased the feeling of God, the more I lost the awareness of Him. That's what no one tells you. Sometimes the most faithful people are the ones who feel the least. They keep walking when the path disappears beneath them. They keep praying when the words feel hollow. They stay when everything in them wants to quit. I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was that I felt alone, not in the way that's loud and panicked, but in the way that slowly drains color from your soul. I smiled when I didn't want to. I said I'm fine because I thought admitting otherwise would make it worse. I thought doubt was a threat, that questions were dangerous, that silence meant God had finally had enough of me. But somewhere in the quiet, deep beneath the noise of my fear, I started to hear something else. Not a voice, not a miracle, just a whisper, a sense. A truth that had always been there but had been buried beneath layers of performance and panic. You never left. I didn't feel you, but you were still near. I couldn't sense you, but you were still steady. I thought the silence meant absence, but maybe it was invitation. Maybe it was space being created for something deeper than feelings. Maybe faith was never supposed to be built on how moved I felt, but how present I was. Maybe you were teaching me to trust you even when you didn't feel close, to believe that you are who you say you are, even when my heart goes quiet. That realization didn't fix everything overnight. I still had days where it felt like I was speaking into a void. I still wrestled with doubt, still longed for the old fire, the emotional surge that made me feel alive in you. But slowly, I started showing up differently, not trying to get something from you, just showing up to be with you, even if I couldn't feel anything, even if my prayers were short or messy or silent. I began to understand that love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's steady, sometimes it waits, sometimes it stays even when no one notices. That's the kind of love you give, isn't it? Not a love that demands emotion, but a love that offers presence. A love that walks beside the doubter. A love that doesn't leave when the lights dim. A love that says, even here I am. I don't know when the feeling will return. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. But I'm learning that you are still worth staying close to, even when my soul feels quiet. Even when my prayers are more questions than praise. Even when I don't have anything to offer except presence. Because you haven't stopped being God, and you haven't stopped being good. And somewhere in this silence, I'm learning to believe again. I thought the silence would make me still, but it didn't. It made me restless. It stirred questions I wasn't ready to ask, and fears I didn't know I still carried. Not just questions about God, but about me, about what my faith was really built on, about whether it could survive when everything familiar fell quiet. I used to think silence meant distance, that when I couldn't feel God, He must have backed away, that He was waiting on the other side of my behavior, arms crossed, eyebrows raised, asking me to get it together before I could hear Him again. But the longer I sat in the silence, the more I realized it wasn't empty. It was full of questions I had buried for years. Questions that didn't fit in Sunday school answers or inspirational quotes. Questions that felt too messy, too raw, too risky to voice. But in the quiet, they rose up anyway. Not to shame me, but to be seen. To be brought into the light. What if I'm not really saved? What if I've gone too far this time? What if God's love has an expiration date? What if I'm not the kind of person He stays close to? What if everyone else hears Him because they're better, cleaner, holier, and I'm just not? What if I'm not enough? What if I never was? The questions started like whispers, but they grew louder. They echoed in the spaces where certainty used to live. And at first, I tried to silence them. I thought faith meant suppressing doubt, that good Christians didn't wrestle, that if I just prayed harder or repented more, the questions would go away. But they didn't. And then, one day, I stopped fighting them. I let them come. I let them sit in the room with me. I didn't pretend to have answers. I just admitted I was afraid. Afraid that I had built my faith on feelings. Afraid that I didn't know how to trust God when He wasn't showing up on my timeline. Afraid that I would always feel this far away. And in that honesty, something shifted. Not dramatically, not visibly, but deeply. I started to realize that maybe the silence wasn't punishment. Maybe it was invitation. Maybe God was asking me to bring my questions to Him, not hide them. To let the questions draw me closer, not push me further. Because the truth is, God isn't threatened by doubt. He's not insecure about my honesty. He doesn't need me to perform belief I don't have. He just wants my presence, my truth, my questions. and my willingness to stay with him in the middle of the unknown. I used to think I had to protect God's reputation with my certainty. Now I know he's strong enough to sit in my silence, to hear my why, without walking away, to hear my "Are you still there?" and whisper, "I never left." I'm learning that faith isn't the absence of questions, it's the decision to bring them anyway. It's choosing to sit with God even when I don't hear him, to trust his character when I don't feel his closeness, to believe in his love when my fear is louder than my faith. The silence still scares me sometimes. I still long for the clear voice, the emotional assurance, the signs I used to crave. But more than that, I long for truth, for relationship, for the kind of connection that's built not just on what I feel, but on who he is. So I'll bring my questions, I'll name my fears, and I'll sit here in the silence, believing that he hears me, not because I feel it, but because he said he does, and his word is still enough. Somewhere along the way, I stopped believing that being loved by you was enough. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was in the way I learned to pray, always phrased with caution, always accompanied by guilt. Or maybe it was in the way I saw others praised for their passion, their consistency, their fire for God, and I thought, that's who he wants, that's who he's proud of. So I started performing, not consciously. I didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to fake my relationship with God. But little by little, my faith became a stage. My prayers became scripts. My worship became well rehearsed. I smiled through sermons I didn't feel, nodded at truths I hadn't wrestled with, raised my hands in rooms where my soul was quietly crumbling. And I thought it pleased you. I thought that's what you wanted. The version of me that could hold it all together. The one who served without breaking. The one who never questioned. The one who looked holy enough to belong. I thought that if I performed well enough, you'd stay. That if I could avoid messing up too badly, I wouldn't lose you. And if I'm honest, there were moments when I was praised for it. People saw the outside and assumed I was doing well spiritually, that I was on fire, that I was close to you, and part of me loved that, because it distracted from the ache, from the growing sense that I didn't actually feel you near, that I hadn't felt you in a long time. But I kept performing, because the silence scared me, because the alternative, showing up broken, unsure, empty, felt like failure. And I didn't think you had space for that. I didn't think you wanted the version of me who doubted, who got tired, who didn't know how to pray anymore. I thought love like yours came with expectations I couldn't meet. That grace had a ceiling, that one day you'd reach it and say, that's enough. I've been patient, but not anymore. But you never did. You never asked me to perform. You never required polish. You didn't call me to impress you. You called me to be with you. And when the show fell apart, when I couldn't keep up the act, you didn't leave. You didn't say, see, I knew it. You just waited. You stayed. And when I finally came undone in front of you, something sacred happened. I was met with kindness, with gentleness, with a voice that didn't say, do better, but simply said, I'm still here. And that voice, that presence, began to melt the performance. I realized you never loved the mask. You loved me, the real me, the one who cries in quiet rooms and wrestles in hidden places. The one who shows up not because she feels worthy, but because she's finally tired of pretending. I don't want to perform anymore. I want to be present. I want to be real, even if it's messy, even if it's small, even if it's just one whispered, help me, at the end of a long day. I want to believe, really believe, that your love doesn't need an act, It just needs honesty. So here I am, not perfect, not polished, but present, and somehow that's enough. It didn't happen with a scream. It happened in silence. I was sitting in my car, hands on the steering wheel, staring blankly at nothing. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the dashboard, and all I could feel was nothing. Not anger, not despair. Just a hollow quiet, like someone had turned off the volume of my life. And for the first time in years, I didn't try to fix it. I didn't quote scripture to myself. I didn't start a worship song. I didn't rehearse some perfect prayer. I just sat there, completely undone. And in that moment, I knew this is what breaking feels like. Not loud, not theatrical, but slow and deep and honest. It was the moment I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't carry the weight of appearing okay while feeling empty. I couldn't keep showing up to life like I wasn't quietly falling apart inside. I couldn't be strong anymore, and I think that was the beginning of healing. For so long, I thought I had to protect everyone from my brokenness. That if I let it out, I'd scare people. That if I told the truth, that I felt far from God, that I was exhausted, that I didn't know how to keep believing, I'd be rejected. I thought I had to be the steady one, the faithful one, the unshakable one. But I was none of those things that day. I was just a tired, cracked soul, finally admitting it, and still, you didn't turn away. You didn't demand an explanation. You didn't require eloquence or a plan. You just stayed. Not in the way I expected. You didn't fix everything in an instant, but you filled the space with presence. You sat with me in the silence, and that changed everything. Because that's when I realized you were never waiting for the polished version of me. You were waiting for this moment when I'd finally let the performance fall away. When I'd stop trying to pray impressive prayers and just speak honestly. When I'd stop quoting verses and start bleeding truth. When I'd stop hiding behind theology and start showing you my heart. And I did. I showed you everything. I let the tears come, not out of sadness, but release. I let the ache surface, not to be pitied, but to be seen. I told you things I hadn't said out loud in years. I told you I was tired of trying to earn love that had already been given. I told you I was scared you'd finally given up on me. I told you I didn't even know if I knew you anymore. And you stayed. You stayed in the silence. You stayed in the mess. You stayed in the questions. You stayed when I had nothing beautiful left to offer. And that was the most beautiful part, because it showed me that breaking wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something real. The beginning of a relationship that wasn't built on performance, but presence. The beginning of trusting that you didn't love me because I was strong. You loved me enough to sit with me while I fell apart. And in that breaking, something sacred began. Not a rebuilding, not yet, but a settling, a grounding, a whisper in my spirit that said, now we begin again. Not on my strength, but on your love. Not with striving, but with surrender. Not with surrender, not with noise, but with stillness. And so I sat there, shattered but safe, weakened but wanted, broken but finally seen. And I knew this is the moment my soul starts breathing again. I thought you would come back to me in a dramatic way, a miracle, a breakthrough, a verse that hit me like lightning. I thought maybe I'd wake up one day and feel your presence wrap around me like fire, undeniable, inescapable, consuming. But that's not how you came. You came quietly. You came slowly. You came like a whisper I almost missed. Not because you were far, but because I was only listening for thunder. You didn't rush in with noise. You waited until I got quiet enough to hear you breathe. And in the silence, I began to notice you again. Not in the ways I expected, but in ways I couldn't deny. In the way sunlight filtered through the blinds as I cried alone on my bedroom floor. In the way a line from an old worship song echoed in my mind long after I stopped singing. In the strangest smile I didn't deserve. In the stillness between sentences. In the exhale I didn't know I was holding. You were there. You had always been there. But my need for noise had drowned out the divine. My addiction to feeling something had numbed me to the nearness I already had. I thought your silence meant absence, but now I see it was invitation. An invitation to grow quieter, to let go of formulas, to stop measuring your love by emotional spikes, to rest in something deeper than emotion, presence. And presence doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It just is, like breath, like heartbeat, like gravity. You don't need to yell because you're already here. And when I stopped trying to manufacture a feeling and simply sat, I began to hear you again, not in words, but in nearness, in the safety of stillness, in the peace that made no sense except that it was you. That's what I missed for so long. Not the miracles, not the feelings, just you. I missed you. I was so busy looking for signs, chasing emotional highs, trying to resurrect the fire I once felt, that I missed the quiet miracle of your consistency. And now, in this silence, I'm learning to listen differently. I'm learning that faith is not always loud, that sometimes it whispers, sometimes it waits, sometimes it weeps beside you in the dark, not saying a word, just staying. And I think that's what you've been doing all along, staying, whispering, waiting for me to finally stop searching for a sensation and start surrendering to stillness. So here I am, quiet, still, listening, not for fireworks, but for footsteps. Not for a show, but for a shadow that never left my side. And I hear you now, in the silence, in the breath between fears, in the space where shame used to live. You're whispering something I've longed to believe. I never left you, and for the first time in a long time, I believe it. I wasn't looking for grace when it found me. I wasn't praying the right words. I wasn't kneeling in reverence or worshipping with holy hands lifted high. I was tired, quiet, questioning everything. I wasn't strong in faith. I wasn't even steady in belief. I was just there, sitting at the bottom of myself, feeling more hollow than whole. And that's when grace showed up. Not as lightning, not as a rescue mission, not even as a breakthrough. It came more like a whisper, like warmth slowly returning to cold skin. I didn't earn it. I didn't provoke it with repentance or religious discipline. I had nothing left to offer. And that, I think, is what made me ready to receive. Because grace doesn't come to the polished, it comes to the undone. It doesn't ask for proof. It doesn't wait for eloquence. It enters gently, not through doors we open by effort, but through cracks we never meant to reveal. That moment, the one I'll never forget, wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. It was a breath. It was a sense that, somehow, I was still seen, still wanted, still loved, even after all the doubt, even after all the silence, even after all the pretending. Grace didn't come to clean me up. It came to sit with me, to remind me that being loved by God was never about my strength. It was always about His. I had spent so long trying to earn closeness, trying to fix what was broken inside me before I brought it to Him. But in that moment, I realized He never asked me to be clean before coming close. He asked me to come, just as I am, just as I was. And when I did, when I stopped resisting and simply let go, that's when grace met me. In the raw, in the ruin, in the real. And it didn't scold me. It didn't tell me how far I'd fallen. It didn't demand an apology. It simply embraced me. And in that embrace, I heard what I'd been longing to believe all along. You're still mine. I still choose you. You are not too far gone. You are still worthy of love, not because you've proven yourself, but because I've already paid for you. And that truth, it broke me in a way that didn't shatter, it rebuilt. I started to believe that maybe God wasn't disappointed in me. Maybe he was simply waiting for me to come home, and grace. It opened the door. No shame, no judgment, just welcome, just mercy, just the steady hand of a father who runs toward the child limping back from the wilderness, not with a lecture, but with love. I don't remember everything I said that day. I just remember what I felt. Rest, relief, return. The burden rolled off. The pressure melted, and in its place was peace. Quiet, deep peace. The kind that doesn't depend on circumstances. The kind that doesn't need everything to be fixed. The kind that whispers, "You're safe now." That was the moment grace found me, and I'll never be the same. It sounds simple, being loved. It sounds easy, even natural. But when you've lived in fear of being too much or not enough, when you've rehearsed every failure more than you've remembered every promise, when you've learned to perform instead of receive, love feels complicated. And after everything, I didn't know how to receive it anymore. I knew how to work. I knew how to repent. I knew how to strive. But I didn't know how to sit still and simply let you love me. I had spent years believing that love had to be earned, that I needed to fix the broken parts of me before I came close, that if I wanted to be held, I needed to be holy. But when grace found me, you didn't hand me a mirror and ask for improvement. You handed me a seat to the table and said, "Stay." And that word, "stay," unraveled something inside me, because I'd never really believed you would. I'd been loved conditionally for so long, even in church, even in ministry. I'd seen what happened when people failed publicly, when people doubted too loudly, when people stopped fitting the mold. I thought you'd do the same. I thought you'd change your mind once you saw how fractured I really was. But you didn't flinch. You didn't fold your arms. You didn't back away. You stayed. And you loved me, not despite my brokenness, but within it. And so now, Lord, I'm trying to learn how to let myself be loved by you, not for who I should be, but for who I am. I'm learning to sit in the quiet and believe that your nearness is not earned by the strength of my worship, but by the depth of your heart. I'm learning to pray without trying to impress you, to show up without hiding, to trust that even on the days I feel unworthy, you're not keeping score. I'm learning that being loved doesn't mean being passive. It means being present. It means letting you into the places I locked long ago. The parts of me that say, "Don't look there. Don't touch that. Don't stay too long." But you come anyway. You knock gently. You wait. And when I finally open the door, you don't scold, you don't rush, you just love, patiently, powerfully, tenderly. And so I exhale, I release, I let go of the fear that said love will leave. I let go of the lie that said I had to earn what you gave freely. And I lean in, slowly, honestly, sometimes with tears in my eyes, and I say, "Okay, Lord, if you're still offering love, I'll learn to receive it. Not perfectly, not without setbacks, but with a heart that's no longer trying to perform, just trying to stay open, just trying to heal, just trying to live as someone already loved. I want to say I'll never leave again. I want to promise you that this time will be different. That now that I've seen grace, now that I've felt you in the silence, now that I've begun to receive love instead of earn it, I'll stay close, I'll stay faithful, I'll stay grounded. But part of me is afraid to promise something I'm not strong enough to keep, because I know myself. I know how I wander, not always with intention, but sometimes by default. I know how easily I slip back into performance, into fear, into old patterns that tell me I have to prove my worth all over again. I know what it's like to feel whole one day and hollow the next, to wake up filled with peace and fall asleep gripped by doubt, to believe you love me in the morning and question it again by night. So I won't make promises today, not because I don't want to be faithful, but because I finally understand. Faithfulness is not about my ability to hold on. It's about trusting that you won't let go. So here's my prayer. If I drift again, if I wake up one day and feel the old shame whispering again, if I get tired and try to carry everything myself, if I choose silence instead of surrender, if I close off instead of letting you in, will you stay? Will you still come sit beside me in the parking lot when I can't find the words to pray? Will you still whisper truth into the noise I've invited back in? Will you still remind me that you never left? Because I think that's what I need most. Not guarantees, not control, not a promise that I'll never fall. Just you, just your presence, just the assurance that even if I'm weak, you'll be strong enough for both of us. I'm learning that grace doesn't disappear when I fail, that love isn't conditional on consistency, that the shepherd doesn't abandon the sheep who wander, he pursues. So, if I drift, if I get distracted, if I fall back into old rhythms, I ask only this: stay close. Hold my hand even when I forget to reach for yours. Speak when I forget how to listen. Wait when I walk away again. And when I turn back, even if I'm limping, even if I'm ashamed, run to me again, like you always do. Because I don't want to run. I just know that I might. And I don't want to forget, but I know that I could. And I don't want to let go, but I know that I've done it before. So stay, please stay, and help me believe, even when I don't feel strong, that your love is not threatened by my weakness, that your mercy doesn't operate on a countdown clock, that your heart is still for me, even when mine is far away. I kept waiting for you to come back. I kept sitting in the silence, hoping for some kind of sign, some confirmation that you still cared, still saw me, still wanted me. I thought I had to earn that. I thought you left when I drifted, that your presence was like a reward, something I had to be holy enough to receive. But all this time, you weren't the one who left. I was the one who stopped looking. I was the one who turned away. And even then, even when I was drowning in my own doubt and shame and silence, you never moved, you stayed. You were there when I questioned everything. You were there when I begged for answers but didn't have the strength to wait for them. You were there when I wore a smile no one questioned, when I served while my soul felt empty, when I sang songs I no longer felt, and you didn't call me a fraud. You called me beloved. You stayed. And now I see it, the love that never left, the hand that never stopped reaching, the heart that never once hesitated, even when I did. I looked for you in the loud, in the miracles, in the moments that felt like fire. But you were in the whisper. You were in the stillness. You were in the breath I didn't know carried you. I thought I needed to feel you to believe you were near. But the truth is, your nearness isn't proven by feeling, it's revealed by faith. And faith I'm learning is not always bold. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's shaking, sometimes it's barely holding on. And you still meet me there. You don't require strength I don't have. You don't ask for certainty when all I have is a flicker of hope. You don't walk away when I admit how scared I am. You stay, and you call it grace. You call it love. You call it home. And that changes everything. Because if you never left, not when I questioned, not when I wondered, not when I broke, then I don't have to be afraid anymore. I don't have to earn closeness. I don't have to fear failure. I don't have to second guess your love. It has always been steady. It has always been stronger than my silence. It has always stayed. And now I can stop striving. I can stop begging. I can stop rehearsing all the reasons you shouldn't want me, because you never left. You never stopped calling me mine. And if you stayed through all of that, you'll stay through whatever comes next. And that's the kind of love that brings me back to life. I don't need the fire anymore. I don't need the feeling to be strong. I don't need every prayer to shake the room or every worship song to bring tears. What I need is you. Just you. And I know now you've always been here. You didn't wait for me at the finish line. You walked every mile beside me, even the ones I tried to walk alone. I used to think walking with God meant constant progress, no questions, no faltering steps. I thought it meant discipline without doubt, devotion without dryness. But now I know better. Walking with you means presence. It means honesty. It means choosing you every day, even when I don't feel you, even when I still struggle to believe I'm worth this kind of love. It means that I'm no longer pretending I can do this alone. I'm no longer performing holiness for people who never saw my pain. I'm no longer exhausting myself trying to be someone you never asked me to be. I'm just here, yours, weak but willing, unsure but honest, tired but turning toward you. I don't walk ahead of you anymore. I don't try to lead. I let you set the pace. And some days it's slow, some days it's heavy, but you're patient, and you're kind, and you're enough. I don't need to prove I'm back. I don't need to catch up to where I should be. I just need to walk, and keep walking. One breath, one step, one surrendered heartbeat at a time. Because it's not about how fast I get there. It's about staying close. It's about waking up and remembering He's still with me. It's about facing temptation and remembering He still calls me mine. It's about falling again and hearing I'm still here. Get up, we keep going. This is not a finish line. It's a beginning. A slow, beautiful unfolding. A daily return to what has always been true. I was never alone. I was never disqualified. I was never unloved. And now I walk with you in the mundane, in the moments no one sees, in the sacred space between fear and faith, in the quiet decision to stay close. And though I may stumble, I know now you will not leave me. You never did. So let's walk, not for applause, not to impress, but because this is home. My soul with you, my life in your hands, my future uncertain but held, my heart still healing but whole in your presence. I don't need to be perfect, I just need to be near. And I am, finally, fully, willingly. Now I walk with you. If you made it to the end, thank you. Thank you for being honest enough to stay with this story. Maybe it wasn't perfect. Maybe it mirrored your own pain. Maybe it felt too real, too close. But maybe that's exactly what you needed. Because the truth is, you're not alone. You've never been. God was in the silence. He was in the doubt. He was in the moment you thought you'd gone too far. And he is here, now. Not because you earned him, not because you're flawless, but because love stays, and he is love. So take a deep breath. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to hide. You're seen, you're still wanted, and you have a hand to hold as you walk forward with the God who never left.